The petition was printed on crisp white paper. No one spoke about it directly, but everyone knew what it was. Tucked into mailboxes, passed quietly over fences, whispered about after PTA meetings. It was a message disguised as concern to maintain the integrity and character of our neighborhood. The language was coded, careful. It never named the Harris family, not outright, but it didn't have to. Everyone knew. Daniel and Alicia Harris had moved into Maple Oaks just 3 months earlier, with their 2 kids and golden retriever in tow. Daniel, a firefighter. Alicia, a high school English teacher. Educated, warm, hardworking, and black. The stairs started before the moving truck pulled away. Short conversations died when they approached. Welcome mat stayed out, but doors never opened. Then came the trash cans knocked over, the graffiti on their fence, "Go back where you came from," and then the petition. The words cut Alicia deeply. She'd spent her life teaching compassion to children, and now she was being reduced to a threat. Daniel tried to stay steady for the kids, but there were nights he sat in the dark living room, staring at the crumpled petition with clenched fists. They didn't fight back with shouting. They didn't leave, they stayed. And then the fire came. It started far away, just smoke on the horizon. But days passed, and the wind changed. One dry afternoon, it swept down from the hills like a beast unchained, consuming everything in its path. Maple Oaks stood directly in the line. Panic spread faster than the flames. Sirens howled. Ash began falling like snow. The evacuation order came just after 3 p.m. Daniel was off duty, but instinct took over. He threw on his gear, helmet, jacket, boots, and ran out the door before Alicia could finish her sentence. While others fled, he ran toward the fire. He knocked on doors, shouting for people to leave. He carried out the elderly. He broke through a window to save a disabled veteran who'd fallen trying to get his oxygen tank. At the end of the street, smoke thick and rising, he reached the house of the family who had started the petition. The Jamesons. Their front door was ajar. Inside, chaos. Mr. Jameson was unconscious at the foot of the stairs. Mrs. Jameson, trembling, trying to lift him. She froze when she saw Daniel. She didn't ask for help. She didn't have to. He lifted her husband onto his shoulder, shielding them both as he led her out. The house groaned behind them, the sky burning orange. He never said a word. At the same time, Alicia was at the community center with the kids. The place was packed, frightened families, lost children, overwhelmed volunteers. Without instruction, Alicia stepped up. She took crying toddlers into her arms. She helped coordinate the volunteers, organize supplies, calm the panic. She moved from cot to cot, mother to mother, child to child. Her voice never wavered. By midnight, the flames were finally pushed back. The neighborhood was spared barely. And the Harris family, they had been its protectors. The next morning, a video of Daniel carrying Mr. Jameson went viral on local news. Headlines read, "Off-duty firefighter saves dozens in wildfire chaos. Teacher turns shelter into safe haven." During blaze, and then a deeper story emerged. A journalist investigating the origin of the neighborhood petition traced it not to concerned families, but to a real estate developer posing as a resident. He had quietly encouraged neighbors to sign, exploiting bias and fear, hoping the Harrises would move so he could buy low and flip their home for profit. The truth struck like a second wave of fire. Ashamed and horrified, neighbors looked at the petition in their hands and saw it for what it was, not just paper, but proof of how easily they'd been manipulated. One by one, neighbors came. They brought flowers, letters, trembling apologies. Some couldn't find the words, only tears. Others confessed openly how they doubted, how they judged, how they'd followed the crowd. The Harris family listened, not with smiles, not with quick forgiveness, but with grace, because even when you've been wronged, forgiveness isn't surrender, it's strength. A week later, The street threw a block party in the Harris family's honor. Alicia wore a flowing dress. Daniel's uniform was replaced by a clean white shirt and jeans. Malik laughed with other kids, and Kayla drew hearts in chalk on the sidewalk. Mrs. Caldwell, the elderly neighbor who once left food quietly on their doorstep, stood on a makeshift stage. Her voice broke as she said, "This family was never a threat to our community. They were its blessing. We just didn't know how to see it." That evening, as stars lit the sky, Daniel sat on the porch, watching families mingle and music drift down the street. His voice, quiet but clear, echoed over the final scene. Fear builds walls, but courage, kindness, and truth break them down. Sometimes we're planted in the middle of resistance, not to be pushed out, but to bloom and change what's around us. And under the soft porch light, surrounded by a neighborhood learning to become better, the Harris family didn't just belong, they led. The sun hung low in a cloudless afternoon sky, casting a golden hue across the freshly trimmed lawns and neatly paved sidewalks of Maple Oaks, a quiet, upper-middle-class suburb tucked just outside the city. Wind chimes danced gently in the breeze, and sprinklers ticked in rhythmic pulses as birds chirped lazily from manicured hedges. A moving truck idled at the curb in front of 145 Rose Willow Lane, a modest yet elegant two-story home with pale grey siding and white shutters. Its new owners had just arrived. Daniel Harris, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped out of the driver's seat. His t-shirt clung to his back, damp from hours on the road. He stretched briefly, then opened the back door for his youngest, Kayla, who immediately bounded out, her braids swinging. A golden retriever leapt after her, tail wagging furiously, barking with the excitement only a dog in a new yard can muster. Behind them came Alicia Harris, graceful and composed even in a wrinkled blouse, holding a to-go cup of coffee in one hand and gently coaxing their teenage son, Malik, from the car with the other. He had headphones around his neck, and that half-hesitant, half-curious look that teens wear when change looms. To anyone watching, they looked like a dream. A respectable, hard-working family chasing a better life, or perhaps simply a quieter one. Daniel, a firefighter with 13 years of service. Alicia, a high school English teacher known for helping underdog students find their voice. Their children well-mannered, intelligent. Max, their golden retriever, perfectly trained. They were the kind of family any neighborhood would be lucky to have. And yet, as the Harris family began unloading boxes, something subtle lingered in the air, a tension not spoken, but deeply felt. A woman from across the street, watering her rose bushes, gave a hesitant wave before turning quickly toward her front door. A couple walking their toddler in a stroller offered a polite welcome, but their eyes darted nervously, their smiles stiff. Curtains shifted behind closed windows. Garage doors that had been open all morning suddenly creaked shut. Daniel noticed. So did Alicia. "We just knew," she whispered, placing a hand on his back. "Give it time," Daniel nodded, though his jaw tightened slightly. This wasn't their first move, and it wasn't the first time they'd been met with pleasant avoidance. Inside, the house still smelled faintly of fresh paint and untouched wood floors. The real estate agent had called it a charming starter home with a great school district and an active, welcoming community. The charm was undeniable, but the welcome, so far, lukewarm at best. Malik wandered upstairs with a box of books, glancing out the window at the quiet street. Down below, Kayla chased Max around the backyard, her laughter echoing off neighboring fences. Alicia began to unpack kitchen essentials, placing mugs on shelves and humming softly to keep the silence from feeling too loud. That evening, a small knock came at the door. Daniel opened it to find an older man, grey hair, golf cap, pressed, polo, holding a plate of cookies. He introduced himself as Mr. Caldwell, from 2 houses down. The gesture felt sincere, and his voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "Just wanted to say hello," he said. "Welcome to the neighborhood." Daniel thanked him, took the cookies, and asked about trash pickup. They spoke for no more than a minute before Mr. Caldwell politely excused himself and walked away without even a glance toward the living room behind Daniel. Later that night, as boxes lay half unpacked and the children slept, Daniel and Alicia sat on their front steps beneath a porch light, sipping tea. "You feel it too, right?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out at the quiet cul-de-sac. Every lawn was perfect, every car washed, every flag hanging straight, a picture of peace, but curated, not lived. "Yeah," he finally said. "I feel it." Alicia leaned her head against his shoulder. "We've done this before. We'll do it again. Just be ourselves. Let them see who we really are." Daniel glanced back at the house, their new home. He thought about the years they'd worked to afford this place, the overtime hours, the late nights Alicia spent grading papers, the missed birthdays, the moments sacrificed for stability. "They will," he said quietly. "Eventually, they'll see." But in the pit of his stomach, something unsettled churned. He didn't know then that the warm facade of the neighborhood would soon crack, that behind its perfect hedges and tidy porches, something uglier lurked. Dot and the Harris family, with their open hearts and quiet strength, were about to be tested in ways they had never expected. The first few weeks in Maple Oaks passed slowly, like pages turning in a book whose tone kept shifting, warm on the surface, but lined with something colder beneath. Daniel mowed the lawn every Sunday, waving to neighbors who barely nodded back. Alicia signed up to volunteer at the local library, but was politely told the slots were already filled. Malik joined the school soccer team, but never got past the ball. Kayla, ever the optimist, painted flowers in chalk on the driveway and taught Max new tricks. Still, they tried. Still, they smiled. But then, the little things started. It began one Wednesday morning. Daniel stepped out to take the recycling bin to the curb and stopped in his tracks. Their trash cans were tipped over, garbage strewn across the driveway, the bag ripped open as if clawed at, coffee grounds, eggshells, wet paper. A banana peel stuck to the side of their mailbox. He looked down the street. Every other bin stood upright, untouched. Alicia came out behind him, arms crossed. "Could have been raccoons," she said, voice even. "Raccoons don't open the lid." "Alicia." He bent down and began picking up the mess silently, jaw clenched. Max sniffed around the trash, but stayed close to Daniel's side, tail low. 2 days later, it was the sprinkler. Malik had gone out to turn it on before sunset, as Daniel had asked, but the nozzle had been twisted off and left lying in the yard. When Daniel inspected it, he found the valve had been deliberately jammed with a screw. Not something that could have happened by accident. Maybe some kid messing around, Alicia offered, but the whirring in her eyes betrayed her voice. She was already starting to keep the curtains drawn tighter at night. It wasn't until the 3rd week that the message stopped pretending to be subtle. On a crisp Monday morning, Daniel opened the back gate to let Max into the yard and froze. Spray painted across the wooden fence in dripping black letters were the words, "Go back where you came from." The world seemed to stop moving. Even the breeze felt still. Daniel didn't call Alicia. He didn't want her to see it first. He stood there, staring, the air thick in his chest. Max barked once, sensing the tension. Then again, louder. By the time Alicia found him minutes later, Daniel had already covered it with an old tarp and duct tape. She didn't say anything when she saw the trembling in his fingers. That night, they put the kids to bed without saying a word about it, but Kayla noticed how her mom kept glancing at the backyard window. Malik didn't say anything either, but he turned his music up louder than usual. The silence in the house was different now, heavier. A week later, Daniel opened the mailbox on his way home from the firehouse and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a flyer, printed on glossy paper, no name signed, but the words cut deep. Petition to preserve the integrity of Maple Oaks. In light of recent changes to our community's makeup, we must take action against non-conforming families before the values of our neighborhood are diluted. This is not about hate. It's about preserving standards. Concerned citizens of Maple Oaks There was a checkbox to sign support, with a return address to drop it off at a local resident's porch. No names, just concerned citizens. Daniel stood frozen on the porch for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. He didn't need names. The message was clear. He tore it in half, then again and again, until the pieces were confetti in the wind. That night, Alicia wept quietly in the bathroom with the door closed. Daniel heard her. He always heard her, but didn't go in. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, the house dark except for the stove light. The kids were asleep. Max lay curled at his feet, ears twitching. "I thought we'd finally found a place where we could just live," Alicia whispered later, standing in the doorway. Her eyes were swollen, her voice soft but steady. "Not to be tolerated, not to be watched, just live." Daniel looked up at her. His face was tired, lines deepening beneath his eyes. "We still can," he said, though even he didn't believe it fully. "We've been through worse, and we're not going anywhere." Alicia stepped closer and took his hand. "But what about the kids? They see it. Even if we don't tell them, we show them how to stand," he said. "That's what they'll remember, not the hate." Outside, Maple Oaks looked peaceful. Lamplights glowing, sprinklers ticking again, neighbors in their robes sipping tea on porches, a picture of order. But inside the Harris home, something more powerful had begun to grow. Not fear, not defeat. Resolve. They would not bend. They would not run, because dignity is not something you ask permission for. It's something you carry, no matter where you are. The days passed with an uneasy rhythm. Every morning, Alicia packed the kids' lunches with a smile, and every evening, Daniel checked the locks twice before bed. The sting of the petition and the graffiti hadn't faded, but the Harris family refused to let it define their every moment. They moved forward with quiet dignity, even if the air around them stayed thick with unspoken judgment. Yet, in that silence, small sounds of kindness began to echo. It started with a pie on the porch. Alicia found it one Sunday afternoon, sitting on the doormat in a pale blue ceramic dish, covered neatly in plastic wrap. A small card lay tucked underneath it. "Welcome to the neighborhood." From a friend. There was no signature. She turned in a slow circle, looking toward the neighboring houses. Windows stared back, empty. Curtains didn't move. No one in sight. She brought the pie inside, warm apple, cinnamon heavy, and set it on the table like a mystery. The next week, there was a casserole. Then banana bread. Each time, no knock, no doorbell. Just a quiet offering, left like a secret. Eventually, the mystery revealed itself. A few days later, Alicia spotted an older woman in a wide straw hat walking up their driveway, holding a covered dish in her hands. Her frame was small, slightly hunched, but her step was determined. Her pale skin was lined with time, and her hands trembled slightly. As she rang the bell. Alicia opened the door. The woman looked up, her eyes a soft blue behind thick lenses. "Hello, dear. I figured it was time I stopped being a coward and knocked properly." Alicia smiled gently. "You must be the one feeding us." The woman laughed, a short, dry chuckle. "Guilty. I'm Marjorie Caldwell. I live 2 houses down, with the tall hedges and the noisy wine chimes." She handed the dish over. "Pot roast. I make it the same way my mother did." "Hope that's all right." "It's more than all right," Alicia said, touched. "Thank you." Double quotes. Mrs. Caldwell paused, then shifted her weight. "May I come in for a moment?" "I won't stay long." Alicia hesitated just for a second, then nodded. "Of course." They sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon light cutting soft angles across the floor. Mrs. Caldwell looked around the home, eyes scanning the photos on the wall. Daniel in his firefighter uniform, Alicia with her students, Kayla grinning, with missing front teeth, Malik holding a soccer trophy. "You have a beautiful family," she said quietly. Alicia looked down, folding a napkin between her fingers. "Thank you." There was a long pause before Mrs. Caldwell spoke again. "I had a son," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "James, he died in a fire. It was years ago now. But when I saw your husband, the way he walks, the way he looks at your children, I see James in him." Alicia's heart caught in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she said. Her voice soft. Mrs. Caldwell nodded, blinking rapidly. "I should have come sooner. I should have said something when I saw what they painted on your fence. But I was afraid, not of you, of everyone else, afraid of being the old woman who defended the wrong people." Her hands gripped the edge of the table. "I'm not proud of that. So I'm here now." Alicia reached across and gently took her hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." That evening, Daniel hugged Alicia a little tighter when she told him. "She's brave," he said. "A quiet kind of brave." Later that week, Alicia had her second encounter, this time with someone younger. She was walking Max through the neighborhood when she heard a voice call out from a porch, "Miss Harris." She turned to see a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, wearing a hoodie and sneakers too big for his feet. He stood uncertainly at the top step of his porch. "It's me. Tyler Jennings. You probably don't remember. I went to Norcross High." Alicia tilted her head, then it clicked. "Oh, you were in my freshman English class. You sat in the back, always had your hood up." He laughed shyly. "Yeah, that was me." She smiled warmly. "You've grown." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I just wanted to say, thanks. You helped me pass that year. I almost got kicked off the soccer team, but you stayed after school with me. My mom never forgot that." "I didn't either." Alicia felt her throat tighten. Tyler looked around nervously. "People here... they don't all treat you right. But not all of us think like that." He nodded once, then ducked back inside before she could reply. These moments were small, a casserole, a memory, a confession, but in a place where suspicion had filled every silence, they mattered. They were reminders that behind drawn curtains, not every heart was closed, not every neighbor whispered behind hands. And sometimes, kindness didn't arrive with fanfare. It came quietly, on paper plates, in midnight footsteps, and overdue thank yous. And for the Harris family, these little lights, flickering though they were, helped them hold the line, because even in hostile soil, goodness finds a way to root itself. The summer had been unusually dry. Rain clouds skirted Maple Oaks, but never stopped. Lawns browned at the edges, and the air hung heavy with heat and static, like something was waiting to break. It did on a Thursday afternoon. The first sign was the faint scent of smoke. Daniel noticed it just after lunch, drifting in through the living room window like a whisper of danger. He stood up, walked to the porch, and scanned the horizon. To the west, where hills rolled beyond the edge of town, a plume of dark smoke billowed upward, thick and slow at first, then growing fast, furious, wide. Alicia walked up beside him, holding a dish towel. "That's not a grill." "No," Daniel said, his voice low. "That's wildfire smoke." The sirens started less than 15 minutes later, long wails slicing the quiet. A crackling voice over the town's emergency alert system urged residents in zones 3 through 7 to prepare for immediate evacuation. Maple Oaks was right on the edge of Zone 6. Daniel didn't hesitate. He disappeared into the garage and emerged minutes later in his gear helmet, fire retardant jacket, boots laced tight. "You're off duty," Alicia said, fear flickering in her eyes. "Not today, I'm not," he said, kissing her forehead. "Get the kids to the center. I'll meet you when I can." And then he was gone, running toward the danger. Flames hadn't yet reached Maple Oaks, but the wind was changing direction, fast and brutal. Smoke swept low over rooftops, and ash began to fall like snow. People panicked, cars backed out of driveways in chaos, horns blaring, tires screeching. But Daniel didn't leave. Instead, he went door to door, pounding on entryways, shouting over the sirens, "Evacuate now. Fire's less than a mile out. Let's go." He helped an elderly couple down their porch steps, holding their arms and loading them into the back seat of a neighbor's van. He carried a toddler whose parents were frantically searching for their cat. He broke a window with his gloved elbow when no one answered, but he saw movement inside a man too paralyzed by fear to open the door. And then he reached Mrs. Caldwell's house. She was standing on her porch, her straw hat in her hands, eyes wide with tears. "I didn't know if anyone would come," she said. "You're not alone," Daniel said, gently lifting her back and guiding her down the steps. He shielded her with his body as ash rained down, his gloved hand never letting go of hers until she was safely in a neighbor's car. He turned to go, but then he saw the house across the street. The Jamesons. The couple who had started the petition. The ones who had called his family non-conforming, who had never once met his eyes on the street. And yet, now their door was open, smoke curling from the hallway, and Mrs. Jameson was screaming for help. Without thinking, Daniel sprinted across the lawn and inside. Mr. Jameson was collapsed near the stairs, his leg bleeding from where he'd fallen trying to lift a heavy suitcase. The fire hadn't reached them yet, but the smoke was choking, heavy, blinding. Daniel didn't pause. He lifted the man onto his shoulder, pulled him out into the street, and dragged him down toward the waiting paramedics. Mrs. Jameson sobbed, clutching her husband's hand, staring at Daniel like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. He didn't wait for thanks. He just turned, coughing into his sleeve, and ran to the next house, while Daniel faced flames. Alicia found herself surrounded by another kind of fire, the fear inside people's hearts. She had taken the kids to the local community center, which had been converted into a temporary shelter. Inside, dozens of families were huddled together, clutching water bottles, phone chargers, and go bags. Children cried, parents argued, volunteers rushed back and forth. Without needing to be asked, Alicia stepped forward. She comforted toddlers with stories and snacks, gently placing blankets over shaking shoulders. She guided elderly residents to cots, helped young mothers soothe their babies, and organized a volunteer list on the whiteboard by the front door. Her voice was calm, commanding. When a boy with asthma began wheezing, she found his inhaler. When an elderly woman had no one to call, Alicia sat beside her and held her hand. "She's the one from Rose Willow Lane." Someone whispered, "She's the teacher, right? They didn't deserve what happened to them." Alicia heard the whispers, but didn't look up. She just kept working, one frightened face at a time. By nightfall, the fire had been contained thanks to a sudden shift in wind and relentless effort from local firefighters, volunteers, and off-duty heroes like Daniel. The Harris family reunited at the shelter, exhausted but safe. Daniel's jacket was stained with smoke, his hands blistered. Alicia's blouse was rumpled, her hair undone, her voice hoarse, but in that moment, they stood taller than anyone else in the room. People approached them not with suspicion, but with gratitude. A man who once refused to meet Daniel's eyes, now clasped his hand with both of his. "You saved my father's life," he said, voice cracking. "I don't know what to say." A woman Alicia had seen at the supermarket, who had once turned away in the checkout line, now hugged her. "You held my daughter's hand when I couldn't find her. Thank you." In one day, the masks had cracked. The neighborhood had seen the truth not through words, but through action. And for the first time since arriving in Maple Oaks, the Harris family wasn't just visible, they were seen. The wildfire had passed, but its ashes lingered. Maple Oaks was no longer pristine. The once perfect lawns were now speckled with soot, and a grey haze clung to the trees like a memory that wouldn't wash away. But something deeper had shifted in the people, in the air, in the way the neighbors now looked at each other. In the way they now looked at the Harris family. The morning of the evacuation, Daniel's name was everywhere. Local news channels looped shaky footage captured on a resident's phone. A firefighter, off duty, pulling an unconscious man from a smoke-filled doorway, shielding an elderly woman with his jacket, sprinting back into danger when everyone else was fleeing. The station anchor, in reverent tones, called him a community hero. At the community center, the camera panned to Alicia gently guiding frightened children into groups, her calm voice cutting through chaos. A local teacher turned shelter coordinator, the voiceover said. Her leadership may have saved more lives than we know. And then came the part that no one expected, a segment on the evening news, 2 days after the fire. A young journalist, sharp-eyed, curious, had dug deeper. She began her report standing on the very street where the Harris family lived, her microphone in hand, the now famous fence behind her. Still faintly visible beneath layers of white paint was the ghost of that hateful phrase, "Go back where you came from." While many believed the recent petition against the Harris family reflected growing racial tension in this neighborhood, the reporter said, "Our investigation uncovered something more sinister." The screen cut to records, documents, highlighted lines, bold headlines. The petition originated not from concerned residents, but from Gregory Talbot, a local real estate speculator who quietly purchased 3 homes in Maple Oaks in the last year. According to sources, Talbot targeted the Harris family shortly after their arrival, believing he could pressure them to sell below market value, leveraging racial bias and community tension to isolate them. The report ended with the words, "It wasn't hate that started the fire around the Harris family. It was greed. And a neighborhood let it burn." The next morning, the quiet on Rose Willow Lane was different, not the cold quiet of avoidance. This one came with glances of shame, with hesitation at mailboxes, with neighbors pausing in their driveways, like they suddenly didn't know how to walk in their own skin. Daniel stood outside, watering the small patch of flowers Kayla had planted. By the porch, the hose hissed gently, the earth steaming under the water. He saw them watching Mr. Jameson, who had once passed him without so much as a nod. The couple with the golden retriever, who always crossed the street when Max was outside. The woman who'd once turned her stroller sharply when Moloch walked. By now, they didn't look away, but neither did they know what to say. Alicia stepped outside beside him. She handed him a mug of coffee, her eyes tired, but softer than they had been in weeks. "You saw the news?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah." Long silence passed between them. "Think it will change anything?" Daniel looked out at the street again. "It already has, a little." Later that day, they heard a knock at the door. When Alicia opened it, Mr. Jameson stood there, his head slightly bowed, a bouquet of sunflowers trembling in his hands. "I don't know where to begin," he said. "My wife and I, we believed the petition was genuine, that it came from people like us. We thought we were protecting our community." Alicia said nothing. Her silence wasn't cruel, it was just heavy. "But we were wrong," he continued. "Not just about the petition, about you. All of you." Daniel stepped forward. Mr. Jameson looked at him, eyes glistening. "You saved my life," he said, voice cracking. "And I didn't even think you belonged here. I'm so sorry." Daniel looked at the man once the face of quiet hostility and simply nodded. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." By the weekend, more neighbors came. Mrs. Lynn, who'd never made eye contact before, brought homemade dumplings. Tyler Jennings' mother dropped off a thank you card with a note that read, "You helped raise a boy who now stands up for what's right." Even the neighborhood association president stopped by with tears in her eyes and a whisper of, "We owe you more than an apology." Still, Daniel and Alicia didn't need fanfare. They didn't crave approval. They just wanted peace. But what they received was something perhaps more valuable, a neighborhood beginning to confront itself, piece by piece. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky turned soft with twilight, Mrs. Caldwell joined Alicia on the porch. The older woman held her cane loosely in her lap, eyes focused on the horizon. "They're starting to see what I saw the day you moved in," she said. Alicia looked at her gently. "And what was that?" Mrs. Caldwell smiled, her voice thick with emotion. "Hope. The kind that makes people uncomfortable. The kind that changes things. Alicia placed her hand on the woman's. Let's hope it stays. The air in Maple Oaks felt different now. There was still healing to be done, trust to rebuild, silence to unlearn. But where walls of suspicion had once stood, something softer now bloomed. Not perfection, but effort. It started with flowers. One by one, neighbors began leaving small bouquets on the Harris family's front porch. Not anonymously. This time, there were names attached. Cards with trembling apologies, a cluster of daisies from the Garcias, tulips from the Use, a wild mix of sunflowers and lily from the Jamesons, along with a note scrawled in awkward cursive. We were wrong. We're sorry. Please forgive us. The next day brought letters, some typed, others handwritten in careful penmanship, words filled with guilt and gratitude. You reminded us what courage looks like. I signed something I didn't fully understand. I see now that fear made me small. Thank you for staying. Daniel read each one slowly at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing the paper as if trying to feel the sincerity behind every line. Alicia read in silence beside him, her eyes wet but unreadable. I don't know if I believe all of them, Daniel said finally. Maybe we don't need to believe all, Alicia replied. Maybe we just need to believe enough. The following Saturday, a flyer landed on every doorstep of the neighborhood, printed in warm tones with soft lettering. Maple Oaks Community Block Party, honoring the Harris family for their strength, compassion, and the light they've brought to our street. Location, Rose Willow Lane. Time, 4 p.m. Details, potluck, music, and shared stories. Let's break bread. Let's begin again. Daniel nearly laughed when he saw it. This street wouldn't wave at us a month ago. Now they're throwing us a party. Alicia smiled gently. It's not a party. It's a reckoning, in disguise. The day of the block party was radiant. Not just because of the weather, though the sky was clear and the breeze just right, but because of the nervous joy that hummed in the air. Children ran down the sidewalks with popsicles. Folding tables lined the curb, covered in potluck dishes, cornbread, grilled chicken, rice casseroles, homemade cookies. A Bluetooth speaker played Marvin Gaye, and laughter, once rare on Rose Willow Lane, came easily now. At the center of it all stood the Harris family. Daniel wore a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled up. Alicia had braided her hair and wore the dress she loved most, but rarely had a reason to wear. Moloch leaned against a tree, trying to look uninterested, but smiling anyway. Kayla danced barefoot with Max trotting behind her. The chalk sheet, once used to draw flowers, now decorating the sidewalk in bright hearts and stars. Neighbors approached, some with baked goods, others with shy embraces. There were clumsy conversations, long pauses, people searching for the right words. The Harris family received them all. Not with bitterness, not with gushing forgiveness, but with grace. Quiet, cautious grace. Daniel shook hands, nodded, accepted kind words with a warmth that never overpromised. Alicia listened more than she spoke, offering understanding without dismissing the pain. They weren't saints. They were human, and somehow that made their acceptance all the more powerful. As the sun began to dip and the golden light settled over the street, Mrs. Caldwell stepped onto a small makeshift stage, a wooden crate someone had dragged from their garage. She clutched a microphone, her hands shaking slightly, but her voice rang clear. I've lived on this street for nearly 30 years, she began, and I've seen it at its best and at its worst. She paused, her eyes finding the Harris family in the crowd. When the Harris family moved in, many of us saw only what we'd been conditioned to fear. But then the fire came, and that fear burned away. What was left was truth. Her voice trembled now. Daniel Harris carried neighbors on his back, through smoke and danger. Alicia gave frightened children a reason to believe adults could be kind. Their children, Kayla, Moloch, they've shown us more joy and strength than some of us have managed in a lifetime. She wiped a tear from her cheek. They are not guests here. They are the heart of this community. And it's time we started acting like their family. A hush fell over the crowd. Then, soft applause. Then louder, until the whole street roared. Alicia's eyes shimmered as she held Daniel's hand. They didn't want this moment, but it had come, and it meant something, not because it erased what had been done, but because it marked the beginning of something different. That night, after the tables had been cleared and music faded, Daniel and Alicia sat on their porch in the quiet. The porch light buzzed softly. Above them, Kayla was asleep inside, Max curled at her feet. Malik was upstairs texting, but occasionally peeked through the blinds, as if afraid it had all been a dream. Daniel took a sip of tea. Never thought I'd see the day, Alicia smiled. Change doesn't always come how we want it, but sometimes it still comes. He looked out across the street, now not a battleground, but a place where children played, where people greeted each other with truth instead of performance. They're learning, he said. They're unlearning, she replied. And sometimes that's even harder. They sat in silence for a while longer. Beneath the stars, and in the stillness, something sacred settled. Not closure, but peace. The cicadas hummed in the evening air, a low, steady chorus beneath the soft rustle of leaves and the distant bark of a dog. The sun had slipped below the treetops, leaving streaks of burnt orange and violet across the sky. Porch lights blinked, on, one by one, like stars daring to shine a little earlier. It was the kind of quiet that once felt tense to careful, to brittle, but now it felt earned. On Rose Willow Lane, the mood had changed, not in fireworks or fanfare but in rhythm, in the way people now waved a little longer, the way doors stayed open a little wider, the way silence had given way to shared laughter, conversation, trust slowly mending in tiny gestures. On the Harris family's porch, Daniel sat in his favorite chair, his boots unlaced, a mug of coffee cooling between his palms. Alicia was beside him, legs tucked under a quilt, her head resting gently on his shoulder. Max lay at their feet, ears twitching in his sleep. Inside, the house glowed softly with life. Kayla singing to herself in the bath, Malik thudding around, upstairs with a soccer ball. The street was calm, peaceful, but behind Daniel's eyes, thoughts stirred like embers. A voice began to speak, not loud, not booming, just steady, quiet, the kind that reaches further than sound. Daniel's voice narrated, "Fear builds walls. It tells you to protect what you know, to distrust what's different, to hide behind what feels safe, even if it means shutting out something good." A flicker of memory passed the first day on this street. False smiles, closed doors, the unspoken message in every sideways glance. But courage. Courage walks through fire. It holds open doors that were slammed shut. It stands tall when everything around it wants you to shrink. Images returned. Daniel carrying Mr. Jameson from the smoke, Alicia guiding frightened children at the shelter, Mrs. Caldwell shaking hands as she offered her first pot roast, Tyler's quiet thank you, flowers on the porch, apologies written in ink and trembling hands. Kindness may not make the headlines, but it's the thread that pulls us back together. It's the hand that reaches across the divide. Even when it trembles. Across the street, porch lights flickered on. The Garcias waved from their steps. The Lynn family's youngest daughter chalked new pictures on the sidewalk, this time with Kayla at her side. And truth, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't always come wrapped in welcome. Sometimes it arrives dressed as pain, but it shows us who we are and who we still need to become. Daniel took a deep breath. The air smelled of jasmine and new grass. We weren't meant to blend in. We weren't meant to retreat. Sometimes we're planted in the middle of resistance, not to be pushed out. He looked at Alicia, who was smiling now with her eyes closed. But to bloom and to change what's around us. The camera panned slowly across the street. The Harrises' once silent home was now filled with light, open windows, laughter. A grill smoked gently in the neighbor's yard. Malik kicked a soccer ball back and forth with Tyler. Mrs. Caldwell sat in a rocking chair on her porch, waving to Kayla as she drew a chalk sunflower. One by one, other neighbors joined, some carrying snacks, some just bringing conversation. No one asked the Harris family to change, and they didn't. It was the neighborhood that had grown, not by accident, but by facing the reflection. The Harrises had held up a mirror not of division, but of possibility. Back on the porch, Daniel leaned his head against the wood paneling and let out a long breath. Not tired, not worn down. Just full of something real. Alicia stirred beside him. What are you thinking about? She asked softly. He smiled. How wildflowers grow in the cracks of sidewalks, she chuckled. What does that mean? It means, he said, we were never supposed to wait for perfect soil. A final line appeared on the screen. Strength is not in how loudly we stand, but in how long we hold the line, with love, with truth, and with grace.